I'm Wilma Bainbridge, head of the Bainbridge lab at the University of Chicago. Today I'm going to tell you about capturing mental representations through drawing and crowdsourced scoring. If you have any questions, feel free to tweet me at Wilma Bainbridge. You can email me at wilma@uchicago.edu and check out our lab website. This video tutorial series goes along with this paper recently published in Behavior Research Methods. Definitely check out the paper. It goes through extensive and nuanced discussions of how to do drawing studies, as well as present some ideas on how you can apply these methods to different questions across psychology. Also, please check out our repository on the Open Science Framework. It includes an extensive wiki, as well as a code base that you can refer to for creating your own drawing experiments. And so one of the big picture takeaways I want you to get from this tutorial is that drawing is a flexible, powerful method that can capture our rich mental representations. And in this video for this first lesson, I'm going to tell you about how to choose and design your task. So the first key important question is, what input method are you going to use? Well, perhaps the simplest is just use pen and paper like we did in our 2019 paper. So you have participants see images, whether it's on paper or on a computer. You then give them paper and a pen and ask them to draw what they see or what they remember. This is a really flexible and adaptable method, and as you can imagine, it's very easy to administer. And so this means you can use this method in all sorts of settings and groups. So for example, in educational settings, in patient settings, across cultures, across societal groups, and even for undergraduates who are busily running across campus, they might be able to quickly draw something for you. That being said, paper and pencil drawings are very hard to digitize. You have to scan them individually, and it can be hard to align the images. One also very important consideration is you need to make sure that your images and drawing boundaries are the same size. So if you present an image at 600 by 800 pixels on a computer screen, make sure you have a rectangle border reflecting those dimensions on your piece of paper. Another input method that you could consider using is using a pen and tablet like we did in our memory and cognition paper. This allows you to track the pen so you can see the order of people's strokes when they're making a drawing, and it's very easy to digitize these tablet drawings. However, there are some cons as well. This can be hard to administer. As you can imagine, whenever you introduce a new piece of technology into an experiment that introduces another potential source of error, this also might be a less familiar interface for participants, so it might feel less natural for them using a tablet to draw. That being said, I highly recommend the Wacom Intuos Pro paper. This is what we used for our study, though keep in mind technology is always changing. But this is a tablet that allows you to use an inked pen on a normal piece of paper, but at the same time, it's digitizing that drawing. So from a participant's point of view, it's the same thing as drawing on a piece of paper, but you're still able to record their pen movements and easily digitize what's being drawn. Another method you can consider is creating a website that has a drawing experiment and tracking one's mouse movements using a mouse to draw. And that's what a key focus of our tutorial is going to be about. And this is a method we use in our 2021 Cortex paper. What's great about using an online drawing experiment collected with a computer mouse is that you're able to track the mouse movement, so you can see the order in which information is being drawn. You can also easily collect remote data. So the reason we use this for our Cortex paper was that we wanted to recruit individuals with a very unique imagery experience. So we recruited them online. This method also means that your drawings are digitized from the get-go. But for some cons, it can be a difficult interface to use for some people. Individuals might find it difficult to draw using a mouse. And with almost any online experiment, you have a higher risk of low effort. When the participant is not there directly interacting with the participant may be less likely to pay full attention to your task. We'll talk a bit more about these online drawing experiments in the next lesson. But that being said, the input method may not matter so much. So I'm going to show you some example drawings from some of our prior studies. So here's a photograph of a living room, and here are some example drawings of people drawing the living room on pen and paper. We have drawings that were done from perception and drawings that were done from memory. Here are also some perceptual and memory drawings drawn using an online computer mouse interface. And as you can see, for both of these groups, the drawings are actually pretty good. We have fairly accurate spatial information. We have identifiable objects. We also have rich use of color. And so in our experiences, we don't see a huge decrement in drawing quality, even when we're doing online studies with drawing. So in designing your task, one important thing to consider is, how do you know if a drawing is a good drawing or a bad drawing? How do you score these drawings? So we can return to that original image of the living room, and let me take just one of those example drawings that someone did from memory on pen and paper. In some ways, it seems like a great drawing. It has very accurate spatial information. It has some of the correct objects, but you can see it also lacks some detail. So for example, it does not have this television on the right side of the image. And so rather than comparing the drawing to the image, what I encourage you to consider is collecting other types of drawings that you can compare your condition of interest to. Specifically, you should collect some upper bound and lower bound drawings. So here, to look at the level of detail that was present in memory, we collected as our upper bound drawings that were done during perception. So participants were directly copying an image while looking at it. And so these perceptual drawings give us a sense of what is the maximum information you would draw from an image. And it also helps control for drawing ability. So you can see here, when someone's copying this living room, they also don't draw the television on the right side. So perhaps this memory is not so bad after all. You should also consider, what is the lower bound you want to use in your experiment? What is the minimum information someone might draw if, for example, they just know the label of the image, but they don't remember specific visual details? And so to estimate this lower bound, we did just that. We gave a different set of participants just the name of the category label. So we told them, draw a living room. And this is an example drawing of a living room. From that, you can see what is the minimum information someone would draw if they just remembered the name of the category, nothing else about the image. And so you can use this as a benchmark to compare the memory drawing. You can see in this category drawing, they did draw a fireplace, but they didn't draw this vase with these flowers in the fireplace. So this shows that really this vase and flowers is a very specific and accurate detail that was drawn from memory. Specifically, how we quantify the detail remembered is we take what was drawn from memory and subtract from that the category information, which sort of represents our minimum amount of information. Then in the denominator, we take the perceptual information. So basically the maximal information you would draw from an image, and also subtract out this category information. However, depending on your questions of interest and your topics of interest, you might consider using other upper bounds and lower bounds for your drawings. I encourage you to look at the paper for some other examples of upper and lower bounds you can use. And so when choosing the conditions for your study, really consider, what is your lower bound? What is your upper bound? Again, it is often better to compare drawings with each other rather than comparing drawings directly with the image. Another thing to think about is, will you compare drawings within participants or between participants? So for example, should I have someone draw an image from memory and then draw it from perception? Or should I compare the memory drawings between two groups of participants? One potential benefit to doing a within participant study is that you can then really easily control for drawing ability, because it's the same within the participant. But one con is, if they're drawing the same information over and over again, they may develop strategies that influence their later drawings. Another question to consider is, will your analyses be by image or by participant? So will you compare or average out the information from many participants for the same image, or will you average out information from many images for a single participant? Here are some other general task considerations to think about. So will you impose a time limit for the drawings? One pro is that this can force a prioritization of key information. Potentially under time pressure, participants will draw the most important information first. But as a con, this could punish those with less drawing expertise. Perhaps those who are less comfortable with drawing may take a longer time to draw something. Another question is, will you tell participants that they are drawing? Of course, in some designs, it's unavoidable. That's just built into the task from the beginning. But in other cases, you might be able to wait until the last moment to tell them. So for example, in our memory studies, when they're studying the images, we don't tell them they're drawing. Only when they reach the retrieval part of the experiment, when they actually have to show us what's in their memories, that's when we tell them and surprise them that they're going to be drawing. This is great because it prevents participants from using honed strategies. If they know in advance that they're going to do a drawing task, they may potentially attend to or perceive an image in a different way, potentially prioritizing information they know that they can draw well. Another thing to think about is, will you cue the participant with any information? This could be potentially used to reveal participants' associations with the cue. So potentially introducing a cue might be an important part of your question. But otherwise, free recall often presents less bias. So instead of saying draw the living room, just say draw what you remember. Because if you tell them draw the living room, they might produce rich detail like we saw in that category drawing just a few slides ago. There's also some things to take into account for when you're doing in-lab studies, as well as when you're doing online computer-based studies. So for in-lab studies, you need to think about what visual angle, resolution, and size your images will be. And as I mentioned before, ensure that your drawing area matches this. Another thing to think about is, will the experimenter watch the drawing process? This is often necessary for administering experiments, but you could imagine the presence of someone else in the room could introduce stress for the participants, especially if they're less comfortable with drawing. For online tasks, there's also some other things you need to think about. So first, will I limit the hardware that can be used? Nowadays, people use many different types of devices in order to participate in experiments. So someone might use a mouse, someone else might use a trackpad, someone might use a mouse nub on their keyboard, someone else might use a finger, and someone else might use a stylus. And so do you want to impose limitations on your participants on what hardware they can use? Because you can imagine that drawings done with a stylus might be of a much higher quality than drawings done with a trackpad on a laptop. Also, another thing to think about is, how can I ensure high data quality in my study? Online experiments often have issues with bots or low effort workers participating in studies. Here are just some of my favorite examples of low effort attempts at drawing this living room. This looks to me like it's instead of platypus and maybe a panda, not this living room. And so one great thing about drawing studies is it's often pretty apparent when they're drawing something completely different from the original stimulus. But still, as for any online study, you need to think about how to ensure high drawing quality or high data quality as well. And I'll get into some other details about this in a later lesson. You can also think about what other measures are useful to you beyond just the black ink showing the drawing. So do you want participants to be able to include colors in their drawings? Do you also want them to be able to include text labels? Those might be useful. It might also be useful to record verbal descriptions in some way, so having them describe the drawing that they just made, either by text or even over voice. Do you want to collect information like the speed of their pen or mouse, and also the pressure that they're applying? That could potentially show some interesting aspects of the drawing process. Do you want to include a questionnaire to see how confident they are about their own drawing skills? Also, if they've had any previous experience with art classes. Also, you could consider recording eye tracking measures, as well as doing drawing tasks during neuroimaging. So in EEG, MEG, or during fMRI or FNIRS. Again, you can refer to the paper for some potential ways you could use neuroimaging with a drawing task. And so the key takeaway for this lesson is, when designing your task, you must consider the balance of flexibility with collection of large-scale data. You could do you could collect very rich data by having a tablet-based study with eye tracking, recording pen pressure, recording vocalizations, but that also might make the experiment less natural to the participants. In contrast, you could have a very flexible and easy study, just pen and paper, but then you might not be able to control as much about the experiment. So those are two different opposite types of experiments that you will need to consider and balance. And so in the next lesson, I'll talk about how to specifically code a drawing experiment. See you then.